in time of war or public danger. The way that people have actually interpreted that phrase, which I believe is, I don't know, it seems wrong to me, because that whole exception belongs together. But they're saying that when it comes to land and naval forces, they got, their court-martial. They've got their own court system when it comes to the land and naval forces. But the militia only is accepted from the grand jury requirement when they're in actual service during a time of war or public danger. So when the militia, let's say, they call forth the National Guard when there's natural disasters, right? So you have a bunch of flooding, a bunch of people are dying, they send forth a militia. Some of the people in the militia are actually raping, robbing, murdering, they're pillaging. They're using their authority, their privileged position in society to commit crimes. So if you have a member of the National Guard during a public danger, when they're in actual service during a public danger, they don't need a grand jury. They can be court-martialed right then and there. But they're saying that or is saying that when it comes to when in actual service in time of war or public danger, only applies to the militia and not to the land or naval forces. So never can the land and naval forces get a grand jury, ask for a grand jury, be demanding a grand jury. No, you're land or naval forces. But for the militia, they're saying only when actual service. When they're in actual service in time of war or public danger, I feel like that should be, there is a comma there, but it could be an Oxford comma. Let's read the sentence again, because that's what textualism is. What do the words mean? Can you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? I'll reread the Fifth Amendment, the Second Amendment, and I'll reread all the militia clauses. And ultimately, we determine the meaning of all these words. The Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime. No person, not citizen. So no person in America can be accused of a felony. Not just citizens, but anybody, foreigners, anybody. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. When in actual service in time of war or public danger. All right, Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. All right, the presidential powers. The president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments. Now let's go with congressional powers. The Congress shall have power. The Congress shall have power to declare war. Excuse me. The Congress shall have power to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. To provide for calling forth. So give them the money when you call forth the militia, to give them the money so that they are called forth. I don't understand the word provide, actually, in that context. The Congress shall have power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit. You had the Oath Keepers, right? You had the Oath Keepers. Oh my goodness. So you had the Oath Keepers, and the Oath Keepers was there at January 6th, And the Oath Keepers, they basically did a calculation, okay, if our guy gets in, we'll get pardoned, and they did. So you had the fucking militia that was there January 6th, and so he calls forth the militia, which is actually fucking remarkable. So anybody that's on the left that isn't part of a militia, not thinking about part of a militia, do you not ever want to win the presidency ever again? He won the presidency because of January 6th. January 6th didn't stop him from taking the fucking... He tried to steal our democracy by violence. That's what a go-getter. That's just like Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez tried to... Fidel Castro tried to take the government. Why just, they try to take it over by violence. Why not just elect them? Let's just put the guys in there, They got a can-do spirit. When you got a can-do spirit like that, my God, we should just go ahead and vote for this fucking tyranny. So the Oath Keepers have been pardoned. They served 1 year in jail, and then they got out. And they get to still do their fucking militia. There's a bunch of militias. I don't know, 100, 200, 300 known militias in America. National Guard is not a militia. Even though the National Guard there's also a Militia Act. So the Militia Act has changed some things, but that's statutes. I'm only looking constitutional. But in the very beginning, we didn't want a standing army. We were afraid that a standing army was a great engine of despotism. Because when you have a king, and the king has a bunch of fucking troops at his disposal, let's just think in a criminal context. You got Tony Soprano, right? Tony Soprano wants to go to war against New Jersey. Or no, he is New Jersey. He wants to go to war against New York. So a crime boss family wants to go to war against New York, and he calls up his own militia. And you have a bunch of criminal sons of bitches, a bunch of motherfucking would-be assassins. So you have a bunch of soldiers that arrive for Tony Soprano to do his war. That's what a militia would be part of the people. In the very beginning of America, there wasn't a National Guard. It was just a private thing. It was not an incorporated thing or a non-profit thing. It was actually a patriotic duty thing. They used to call it muster days. So during muster days, we had to give, as Americans, we had to give like hours of our time. I don't know if every day, every week, every month, but we needed to be a well-regulated militia. So if we were going to maintain our well-regulated militia, either by county, by local, by family, by tribe, we had to make sure that we had periodic days that we trained. And so these were muster days. And I want to say that everybody from 18 to fucking 60 years old had to participate in these things. That was the militia. Because we don't believe in standing armies. Tony Soprano wants to go to war against New York because he wants to rape, rob, pillage, and do whatever he wants to do to New York. He calls forth all these criminals. We got a standing army. So he's got a standing army sitting around. How long is he going to stand on the standing army? How long is he going to let the standing army eat his food, drink his drink? He's giving them guns. They're disciplining. They're training. They're doing all these maneuvers. He wants to go to war with New York. When you have a standing army standing around, how easy is it for the tyrant to just say, all right, well, we're going to take over New York, then we're going to take over Pennsylvania, then we're going to take over West Virginia. Hiya! We're going to take over all these states. Why? Because I got a standing army. But they didn't do anything, sir. It doesn't matter. But they're sovereign states. It doesn't fucking matter. But you're going to start a civil war. Who gives a shit? I want the power. So that's why a standing army is a great engine of despotism. That's why we have the militia clause. That's why they provided for the militia. They allowed for a professional army to be created, but the whole idea was that we don't want standing armies around because when you have a king with a standing army and the war is over, well, the standing army then starts oppressing us. The Third Amendment, actually the Third Amendment kind of has something to do with the no soldier in time of peace shall be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So they had a standing army that not only is,